Greetings and welcome back to the No Channel. This is Bernadette Johnson. I'm also known as Keziah or Kizzy. And today I'm coming to you with another video, and this is actually a follow-up video to my most recent video I did on the Sibyls, the ancient African prophetesses. Well, in this video, as I said, it's a follow-up video. I'm going to be clarifying, which I thought I'd made it clear in my first video, that I was in no way pushing paganism or goddess worship. That's why I'm titling this video, The Sibyls and Cybele the Goddess. It's teaching on the Sibyls promoting paganism and goddess worship. I've heard that, well, not heard, I've seen myself where I was indirectly accused of such, pushing goddess worship. But I'm here to set the record straight. If I didn't make it clear in the last video, well, I'm here to set the record straight in this one. So, of course, if you listen to my last video, I was discussing a particular book in that video titled The Sibyls, the First Prophetess of Mamiwata, the Theft of African Prophecy by the Catholic Church. And if you haven't, seen that video, I encourage you to watch it, because that way, you'll better understand why I'm saying what I'm saying in this video. And so that video was titled The Sibyls, the Ancient Prophetesses, the Ancient African Prophetesses. And in my using of the word the Sibyls, I made it clear when I used that word Sibyls, I was referring to prophetesses. That's all I was doing. But there are some who may want to link this word, the Sibyls, to the goddess Cybele. Because see, we speak a bastard language. So it wouldn't be a surprise if some of the words we use, especially when it comes to spiritual, faith-based matters, it wouldn't be surprised if some of those words are linked to paganism, idols. And I'm going to show you, a word or two as an example of how it's, linked to paganism. But anyway, it was that word, that name, Cybele, is very similar to Sibyl. And we're going to see today if there's any relation between Cybele and Sibyl. So, if you hang tight, we're going to have an interesting discussion. Well, at least I hope it's going to be an interesting discussion. Okay, so this Sibyl, as I said, we speak a bastard language, and a lot of these words that we use in the English language has Latin and Greek roots. And the Sibyls is a Latin and Greek word. And as I said, a lot of these words that we use can trace back to an idol. But does that mean we're worshiping idols? No, it's because we're speaking a bastard language. We're not speaking our pure language. And also, too, I want to make clear, I was using the Sibyls because that was the title of the book. I still say the word prophetess. That was the only reason I was using Sibyls, because the author, Mama Zogbe, she titled the book The Sibyls. Okay, so let's continue. So now let's look at this goddess Cybele. Since this word is very similar to Sibyl, and if some would try to say that, oh, Sibyl is derived from the goddess Cybele. Oh, you're pushing paganism. Oh, you're claiming you're not, but yes, you are. Look at the similarity of those words. There's no way that you're not pushing goddess worship. Okay, let's continue. So this is just a little brief description of this goddess Cybele in the Wikipedia. I just got this from the Wikipedia. So Cybele, which is Phrygian, is an Anatolian mother goddess. That's the Asia Minor, Turkey area. And she may have a possible forerunner in the earliest Neolithic at Katahoya, excuse me if I'm pronouncing this word, and she is Phrygia's only known goddess, and likely its national deity. Greek colonists in Asia Minor adapted her Phrygian cult and spread it to mainland Greece and to the more distant Western Greek colonies around the 6th century BC. In Greece, Cybele met with a mixed reception. She became partially assimilated to aspects of the earth goddess Gaia, of her possibility Minoan equivalent Rhea, and of the mother harvest goddess Demeter. Some city-states, notably Athens, evoked her as a protector, but her most celebrated Greek rites and processions show her as an essentially foreign, exotic mystery goddess who arrives in a lion-drawn chariot to the accompaniment of wild music, wine, and a disorderly, ecstatic following. Uniquely in Greek religion, she had a unique mendicant priesthood, that's a priesthood of castrated men. Many of her Greek cults included rites to a divine Phrygian castrate shepherd consort, Attis, who was probably a Greek invention. In Greece, Cybele became associated with mountains, town and city walls, fertile nature, and wild animals, especially lions. So I just wanted to just give you a brief description, since Cybele was in the title, give you a brief description of this goddess and, what she was known for. So that's just a brief description of Cybele. Now, this next slide is Sibylline books. Now, this is also was in the same write-up on Cybele. So Sibylline books showed up in the writing on Cybele. And you all know that I also included something on the Sibylline oracles in my lesson on the Sibyls, the African prophetesses. So one may think this Sibylline books that's associated with a paganism and the goddess Cybele is the same thing as what I was showing. At that beginning, I thought so too. But as I continue reading, I found out different. So this is a little part I have highlighted in yellow here. The Sibylline books, which is associated with, the paganism, are not the same as the Sibylline oracles. That's what I showed you in my video, the Sibylline oracles, which are 14 books and 8 fragments of prophecies known to be of Judeo-Christian origin. So no, they are not the same. One is called Sibylline books and the other is called Sibylline oracles. So I want to make that clear, that the books that I was pushing was not the same thing as the Sibylline books. Now, I was saying that there are some words that we use in our English language that are either traced back to an idol, or some people claim that they're derived from idols, pagan gods, because of the similarity in the pronunciation. For instance, okay, you know what? I messed up. Let me go back to oracles. I skipped this slide. Hold the thought about the church. Let me go back to the oracles. Now, as I said, I showed you in my previous lesson on the Sibyls, where I talked about the Sibylline oracles. This is a little brief description of it in the Wikipedia on the oracles that I was talking about. Okay, the Sibylline oracles, sometimes called the pseudo-Sibylline oracles, are a collection of oracular utterances written in Greek hexameters ascribed to the Sibyls, prophetesses who utter divine revelations in a frenzied state. Keep all that in mind. 14 books and 8 fragments of Sibylline oracles survive in an edition of the 6th or 7th century AD. They are not to be confused with the original Sibylline books of the ancient Etruscans and Romans, which were burned by the order of the Roman general Flavius Stilicho in the 14th century AD. Instead, the text is an old pastiche of Hellenistic and Roman mythology interspersed with Jewish, Gnostic, and early Christian legend. The Sibylline oracles are a valuable source of information about classical mythology and first early millennial Gnostic, Hellenistic, Jewish, and Christian beliefs. Some apocalyptic passages scattered throughout seem to foreshadow themes of the book of Revelation and other apocalyptic literature. The oracles have undergone extensive editing, rewriting, and redaction as they came to be exploited in wider circles. And then, one passage has an acrostic spelling out a Christian code phrase with the first letters of the successive lines. But this is what I want to hop on right quick. It's been edited and rewritten. What we see now as the Sibylline oracles, what we read now as the Sibylline oracles, is not what it was originally. So that's what I want you to know too. When you read it, just know that this is not the original that we're reading. It's been edited and it's been tampered with. Okay, so now let's go back to the discussion of the church. I skipped the slide. Now, as far as I said, that a lot of the words that we used can be traced back to idols, pagan gods, or it can be assumed that it's associated with an idol or pagan god due to the similarity of the pronunciation. For instance, the word church, the origin of it in Old English is called like circe or series. In German is called, in Dutch is called kirk or kirch. And Greek, kurikan, and all of that, which it means, Lord's house, kurios, master of the Lord. Some people, because of the similarity of, in Old English, they think that church is derived from the Greek goddess Circe, which is in Greek legend a sorceress, the daughter of Helios, the sun god of the ocean nymph Perse. I won't go into the whole thing. But a lot of people say that church originated from the Greek goddess, but according to AI, that there's no clear evidence of this. But that's what people claim. So I'm just using this as an example. Here is another one. Crucify. Of course, most of you know what crucify mean. They crucified Jesus, they crucified the Messiah, they crucified our Savior. And it means to nail to a cross, to execute, to put to death. And then, of course, and that's what people say, they crucify. But of course, crucify is associated with the cross. And let me show you some information about the cross. And I'm so sorry, my Christian listeners, but the cross symbol is of pagan origin. And I did, an AI search, and it said, according to historical evidence, the cross is considered a pagan symbol, and it is widely used as in various pre-Christian cultures, before being adopted by Christianity, particularly after the time of the Emperor Constantine, who promoted its use as a Christian symbol when he converted, Rome to Christianity. He was the one who adopted that symbol. And here's some more. So the early Christians did not widely use the cross as a symbol, and some evidence suggests they initially avoided it due to its pagan associations, because the Messiah was not executed on a cross. He was executed on a stake. That's like one piece of wood. It's like a stake, one piece of wood. So he was not executed on a cross. So yes, the cross is a pagan symbol. However, if someone would say, they're talking about the Messiah, they're talking about the Messiah. Oh, the Savior was crucified for our sins. Would you stone them because they say he was crucified? They mean execute. That's what they mean. So that's an example, like when we were speaking of bastardized language, and the word that we use can be traced back to a pagan thing, like the cross is a pagan symbol. But even if they say crucified, what they mean. So even as far as like the word, so the point I'm making is Sibyl. If Sibyl can be traced back to the goddess Cybele, Sibyl is a Latin and Greek word. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that this is somehow tied to Cybele. That's if it's somehow, but we're going to find out and see if it is later on in this discussion. So I want to talk about these people who, now I'm getting on my Israelite brothers and sisters now. Those of you who are just Yah only, you don't believe in any other variations of the Yah's name. You don't believe in Yahuwah. You don't believe in the name Yahuwah. You don't believe in the name Yahweh, Yahweh, or what other variations there are of Yah's name. You just say, oh, it's Yah only. Okay. So and you're saying, oh, all these other names is pagan, this and that. Okay, so if that's how it's going to be, let me show you something. This Yah that you're saying, oh, this is the only name we should use, it also has pagan origin. Yah is also the name of a lunar goddess in ancient Egypt. It means moon. It's a moon god. And it is also transcribed as Yah, Y-A-H, or Jah, like it's depicted as it's written in the King James Version. So let's not be so dogmatic and so judgmental against other people, because you always if you're accusing other people of using pagan names or promoting a word or something that's associated with pagan gods, well, someone could say the same thing about the God that you're promoting. Of course, I have absolutely nothing against the usage of the name Yah. I still say Yah. I still primarily say Yah. But I also say Yahuwah. I don't have a problem with the name Yahuwah either. So let's not do that. We know things are messed up. Now, we are no longer speaking the pure language. So let's not be too hard on each other. We're all doing the best we can here. So I just wanted to show you that. So be careful when you speak against other people and what they're pushing, because someone can use the same thing on you. So all these lists of false gods and pagan idols that you're sharing, well, you can add Yah to that list too, if that's how we're doing it. If that's how we're doing it, you can add Yah to that list too. But no, I'm not going to do that. Because like I said, things have all been mixed up. Okay, so now, let's continue. Now, I said we was going to examine the word Sibyl. Since I was accused of witchcraft and, well, indirectly accused of witchcraft and pushing goddess, let's just look at Sibyls. Let's just pull up some entries of different dictionaries of this word Sibyl. Okay, this is one entry here. Sibyl is a woman in ancient times supposed to utter the oracles of the oracles and prophecies of a god. The second entry, a woman able to foretell the future. Now this was used to say, okay, yes, she's pushing goddess worship, because look at how Sibyl is described. It's described as a woman who utters the prophecies of a god. Well, if someone can utter the prophecies of a god, that means they can utter the prophecies of any higher power, which would include the Most High. The reason it says a god here, because this is a word of a Latin and Greek word. Greece and Rome historically were pagan societies. So that's why it would say a god. This second entry here, I just want to show you all something. When it comes to this word Sibyl, this is the first entry from dictionary.com. Of any of certain women of antiquity reputed to possess the powers of prophecy or divination, a female prophet or witch. Now, when you look up this word Sibyl, you're going to see They always have to put some kind of negative connotation to it. Divination, this is a word that has some negative connotation to it. But if y'all doesn't change my mind, I'm going to, discuss this word in a future video if he doesn't change my mind. And in the second interest, okay, it says a female prophet, but it's also going to attach witch to it. And if you look this up, they're always going to attach something negative to this Sibyl. There is something about this word Sibyl that they try to throw shade on. Let's continue. This is another one. This is from wordreference.com. Any of certain women of antiquity reputed to possess the powers of prophecy or divination, a female prophet or witch. And as I had said, they always try to put a negative connotation to it. And I'm going to tell you right now, there is a reason for that, which I'm going to explain in just a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's get into the origin of this word Sibyl. Sibyl is a feminine name of Latin and Greek origin, derived from Cybele, meaning prophetess or oracle. In ancient Greek myth, Sibyls were prophetic women who interpreted messages from the gods. Like I said, this was in Greek myth. This is a pagan society. They're going to say from the gods, even if the Sibyls were actually speaking words from the Most High. These pagans going to say the gods. Okay, let's continue. These powerful oracles would enter a trance and would be inspired by the gods. And also, don't get caught up on the word trance. Don't trip on trance, because there were prophets and apostles in the Bible who also would go into a trance. Let's continue. I'm going to repeat this sentence. These powerful oracles would enter a trance and be inspired by the gods, speaking riddles. Remember that word riddles. Speaking riddles to be interpreted by priests. For the baby whose cosmic eye are all seeing and knowing, Sibyl is not only a beautiful, unique name, but one steeped in ancient mysticism. Here's some more shade here. Now, I don't know if they mean it, but see, mysticism can also be a type of negative term too. I'm not sure if that's how it was meant to be taken in this particular source, but mysticism can also be negative too. So I noticed that a lot of times when they talk about this word Sibyls, they make sure to put some kind of negative connotation on. Okay, so I told you to keep this riddles in mind. Now you're saying that these Sibyls spoke riddles to be interpreted by priests. Now, my understanding of riddles is that's something to be solved, not necessarily something to be interpreted. So I decided to look riddles up. So I went to the Merriam-Webster, and this is the first entry of riddle. A mystifying, misleading, or puzzling question posed as a problem to be solved or guessed. And that's my understanding of what a riddle is. However, the second entry says this: something or someone difficult to understand. And if you go back, it says riddles to be interpreted by the priest. Something or someone difficult to understand. Now, if someone is talking to you and you can't understand them, or you have a hard time understanding them, either they're not speaking clearly, or they could be speaking in another language. So, when you're reading the Bible, what are things that needs to be interpreted? Speaking in tongues. And they said that these Sibyls would enter into a trance And in one entry where I was talking about the Sibylline oracles, they were in a frenzied state. Now, if you will read Acts 2, now I'm not going to go into Acts 2 because I don't want this video to be too long. But if you read Acts 2 and how it described the apostles when they, on the day of Pentecost, when they left out of the upper room, a lot of those, the travelers who came from, all over, they were saying these people are drunk. They were saying these men are drunk. But I also believe that there were women in that number. Why? Because in chapter 1 of Acts, there were women also in the upper room. Even Miriam, Yeshua's mother, she was in the upper room. There were women in there too. So I don't think it was just men. But anyway, not to get lost on that. They described when the apostles came out of the upper room. What did the others say? These men are drunk on new wine. They thought they were drunk. Now, that passage always confused me. I said, now why were they suspected of being drunk on new wine when they were just speaking languages that the foreigners, well, they weren't really just foreigners, they were Israelites, but they were Israelites who had lived in other regions of the world, so they spoke different languages. They weren't speaking, they no longer spoke the Hebrew language. I was puzzled. I said, why did they think that these apostles were drunk? Simply because they were speaking in a language that they understand. No, the reason that they thought that they were drunk, they was probably acting in a state like maybe a frenzied state. Maybe they were in a trance-like state. You observe how a person is drunk. A lot of times they have a spaced out look. Maybe they're acting, erratic or something like that. So that's what made me think that these Sibyls and these riddles that they was talking about, speaking in riddles, and the priests had to interpret these riddles, they were speaking in tongues. And to the foreigners, they just thought that these Sibyls were just doing some frenzied babbling. And if you're someone, it's because tongues is just speaking in another language. When you hear someone speaking in another language, to them, to you, it's just a bunch of gibberish. To you, it's a bunch of gibberish. So to these foreigners, it would seem like they were babbling. They were speaking in a frenzied way. And maybe they were as they were speaking in tongues, maybe they were in a state of excitement. If they were under the anointing, maybe they were in a state of excitement. So with these Sibyls, as I said in the first video I did, these Sibyls were Israelite and non-Israelite. So yes, these Sibyls could have been inspired by pagan gods and also the Most High. And I also believe that these Sibyls were Black women. That's why I titled my first one, The African Prophetesses. Yes, I believe these were Black women. And you think about it like when speaking in tongues. If you all, ever went to a holiness church or apostolic church, and the people, they go off and speaking in tongues. I'm trying to give you just some kind of visual, of how it probably would have been with these Sibyls. And you hear people, especially like the women, speaking in tongues, since we're talking about women here. You tell a lot of times the Black women in the holiness church speaking in tongues. So I'm kind of trying to give you a kind of a picture of how it probably would have been with these Sibyls back in those ancient times and how they would have looked to these foreigners who saw them, doing this babbling. They would say babbling because they were, they didn't understand what they were saying. Speaking in tongues, that's speaking in other languages. So I just thought when I came across that, I said, oh, wow, this is powerful. But see, the thing is, in that slide, they say ancient Greek myth. So when you say Greek myth, you say, oh, well, these are some Sibyls just doing some, silly babbling, because you would say, oh, they're just pagans doing some silly babbling. But were they just pagans doing some silly babbling? Because it is the frenzied babbling Sibyls that's associated with the Sibylline oracles that I had talked about. So that's why I'm suspecting that these Sibyls were speaking in tongues. And also, let's just continue a little bit more about this the Sibyls here. Now, I said that Sibyl, the word Sibyl is of Latin and Greek origin, but I came across some sources. That's the one in the Wikipedia on the Sibyl, and there's another one which I'll be showing you in just a bit, that actually says that the word Sibyl is possibly of Shemitic origin. That would mean it's possibly of Afro-Asiatic origin. And if it's of Shemitic origin, it's possibly of Hebrew origin. And if you look at this word Sibyl, if you break it down, this last syllable, I want you to take a look at YL. And if you're familiar with YL, now I pull this up in AI. In Hebrew, YL is associated with the Most High. Let's read this. In Hebrew, YL is considered a root meaning to be first or powerful, often appearing in words related to strength, leadership, or a primary position. One prominent example is the word Elohim, which is God, where El is considered a related root signifying God or divine power. That's just something to think about. Is Sibyl truly of Latin and Greek origin? Because you know, the Romans and the Greek, they borrowed a lot from the Africans, because the Africans was African civilization. They had a lot of powerful civilizations, and they borrowed a lot from those powerful African civilizations. So it wouldn't be a reach to suspect that they borrowed this word Sibyls from the Africans, from the Afro-Asiatics. It will not be a reach. So I just wanted to plant that thought and give you something to think about. And those who try to blast this word Sibyl, you may want to think twice before you go blasting it. All right. So let's answer the big question. So is Sibyl related to the goddess Cybele? Let's see what AI says. Now, AI is not always reliable, but in this instance, I can trust it. It says, while not directly the same figure in ancient mythology, the Sibyl is often considered a related or even sometimes interchangeable figure with the goddess Cybele, as both are associated with the prophetic abilities and are often depicted as powerful, mysterious female figures with connections to oracles and sacred sites. Essentially, the Sibyl can be seen as a specific prophetess connected to the broader archetype of the great mother goddess like Cybele. See, it's not saying that it's actually related. It is considered because of some of the similarities in their characteristics. They both have prophetic powers. They're both feminine. And those associated with them were connected to the oracles and sacred sites. But that's not saying they're the same. They're just connected based on their similar characteristics. Both the Cybele and the Sibyls were believed to have prophetic powers and could deliver oracles. Just because something has a couple of things in common does not make them the same, does not mean that one is derived from the other. The worship of Cybele spread across regions like Greece and Rome. The Sibyls were also prominent figures in prophecy. Name similarity. The name Cybele and Sibyl share some phonetic similarities. And just because words share such phonetic similarities does not mean that they're the same. Now, I just want to throw in that, even things with phonetic similarities, they have the same sound vibration, sound frequency. But that is another discussion for another day. So let's just be clear. Yes, they're just people just interchangeably, use them because they have some similarities. But just to say that the Sibyl is derived from Cybele? No. As it says, they're not directly the same figure. Okay, so, and this is just some Eurocentric depictions of the Sibyls. I got these from Wikipedia. And as I said, the Sibyls were actually Black women, women of African origin. But of course, as so much of our history has been whitewashed, the Sibyls are no exception. So most depictions you see of the Sibyls are of, lighter skinned Caucasian type women. And then this next slide. This is just the, if you want to read more on the Sibyls, this is from the Jewish Encyclopedia, that you can read more about the Sibyls. So I thought that was a good place. And I think it was in this one where I also read that it's possible that the word Sibyl is of Shemitic origin. So hopefully in this video, I made it clear that no, I'm not pushing any goddess worship. And that you see now that Cybele and Sibyl is not derived from the other. They're just people associate them together because of a couple of their characteristics are similar. That's the only reason. People are doing this. One did not derive from the other. Well, I say this, Sibyl did not come from Cybele. So I hopefully this video made it clear that I'm not pushing any kind of goddess worship. So I'm going to close out. So I think I said all that needs to be said. Hopefully I shouldn't have to come back and make any more clarifications. I hope I was clear enough in this video. Anyway, you all continue to be blessed.